So it is 7:02. We're about to start the meeting, but for those who would like to do the Pledge of Allegiance, let's go ahead and do that now.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. All right. Good evening. Welcome to a regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. Today is January 8th, 2024. The time is 7:02 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Evans?
Here.
Trustee Franker? Here.
Trustee Hopper.
Here.
Trustee Bierma.
Here.
Trustee George.
Here. Sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Here.
Mayor Furman.
Here. Thank you very much. Do we have any revisions to this evening's agenda?
We do not.
Okay, great. We'll now open up for public comment. We will start with in-person comment, move to Zoom comments. If you're on Zoom, please click the raise hand button and we will put you in the queue. Please introduce yourself and then we'll give you a 3-minute timer.
Skinner, I've had this copy. I didn't want to email it to you guys, but I wanted to read it so it's in the record for today. One of the things that this current board is great at is providing a long-term solution to issues so they do not reappear before the board again and again. I admire the current board members for implementing this tactic to take permanent decisions on various subjects otherwise. The Hillside Cemetery belongs to the town of Silverton. Board member Wanda Miller made sure there was money in the annual budget for work at the cemetery. Every summer, someone was hired to work on things that fell into disrepair. It was not a lot of money, but the employee accomplished a lot of repair every summer. Issues surrounding the cemetery are often unreasonably emotional. It would be best for the town to completely take over management of the cemetery in all aspects. This would remove the emotional element from the cemetery concerns. The dying wish of a local Silverton resident is to provide a wind phone in the cemetery. The wind phone is designed to be a quiet place for people to speak with their loved one. It provides a place for people to honor and reflect on the deceased. It is designed to be a peaceful place. The majority of the people in this town like the wind phone and like the location. It is a stunningly beautiful addition. I find it very offensive that the Historical Society chose to create a very emotional situation at the expense of a terminally ill resident of Silverton. This resident is a very nice and very intelligent woman. I find it most offensive that the Historical Society is choosing to honor a set of graves by demanding another memorial be removed. This is blatant classism, which is a chronic problem with the Historical Society. Several years ago, an older man died in Silverton. The Historical Society member chose to place this man's coffin with the rest of the reprobates. The Historical Society has set out to prove that we are not equal even in death. This should not be allowed to happen. The Historical Society clearly believes that the remains of 2 people are more important than the remains of a current living resident. And the Historical Society should be ashamed of being bullies and needs to find some compassion. I personally am requesting the town take complete control of the Hillside Cemetery and remove any chance of more creative drama. If you decide to have a cemetery committee, make sure the committee has only 1 member from the Historical Society. Thank you.
And we do not have any other in-person comments. We'll move to our Zoom comments. And I see 1 hand raised, and that's Nancy Brockman, and we're promoting Nancy panelist. I see another hand raised, so you're in the queue after Nancy.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. This is Nancy Brockman. I'm the Silverton resident and owner of the Hillside Wind Phone. and its plot. I'm truly sorry for the time that this is taken away from important town business, and I hope this evening will be the end of the issue, so you can all move on with the important things that you guys do to continue moving Silverton forward. The saddest part for me for all of this has been the lack of civil communication. Despite inviting people to contact me, only one kind man did visit me, and in the end, he had a better understanding of the wind phone's purpose and was able to hug me and show concern for my health situation. Instead, I had to take out a $750 full-page ad to provide a different point of view than the rhetoric and misinformation that was prevalent in social media and in the pages of the Historical Society's pleas to the trustees in December. I am confident that the trustees have read that ad and the 10 or so positive letters to the editor in favor of the wind phone remaining where it is and becoming part of Silverton's history. I also know that there are many people who have reached out to the trustees directly, and some of those those reaches out were in part of the meeting packet. My true hope is that in the Silverton Standards Esper caboose in the year 2043, under the 20-year ago area, that it reads something like this. 20 years ago, a British phone box was placed in the Silverton Hillside Cemetery to memorialize a resident's life and provide a resource for all of those who have losses to grieve. Not without controversy at the time, the Hillside Wind Phone has since become a welcome piece of history and well-known place to find peace and aid with grief for locals and visitors alike. Thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy. JP and Kim, you've been promoted to panelist, and the floor is yours. Did see that you unmuted yourself, but we can't hear you yet.
Are you guys speaking to me?
Yep, we can hear you now. The floor is yours.
Okay. My name is JP Stanley, or John Paul Stanley, a friend of Nancy, a resident of Silverton, and Nancy approached me about the phone booth before she had even purchased it. And we talked in depth about her reasoning, that she had gone through the process, but wanted to know how I felt about it. Not only as a friend, but also as someone that could actually make this happen for her. And my, without even thinking, first response was, oh my gosh, this is an amazing thing to provide for not only her and her peace and what she is trying to do for not her, but for others, for the town of Silverton, for us as her friends, for the people that responded to it the first time they ever seen it up there. And to say that they just had the peace and was able to talk to loved ones they haven't been able to do that with, in the comfort that they were able to when they stepped into that booth, reaching out to their pets. I think it was also something that they had established in their comments on Facebook. My thing is that I am a part of this with Nancy, and along with, I would assume, hundreds of others. And we stand beside this, and we look at this as an opportunity for people in the future to reconnect, join in, and grieve and share their thoughts and share their funnies and their stories in a space that they can be their own. And I just say that I love the phone booth as many others do. I think that it's something that's going to be for generations to come that they can enjoy, and I'm for it. And that's all.
Thank you, JP. I did see a couple attendees or participants join the Zoom. We're in public comment. If you'd like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button. We'll promote you to panelist. Otherwise, we'll be closing public comment momentarily. All right, seeing no further public comment requests, we will close public comment. We will have another public comment period at the end of the meeting, and we'll move on to item 3A on our agenda, which is a presentation of the wetland story map by Ironwood Consultants. And I believe Emily is planning to present. And Emily, you're on as a panelist. If you unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Actually, I think Issa is going to present. So
Oh,
I'm just
wonderful.
here to provide support or answer any questions that I can. So I'll pass it to Issa.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to get my video going here. I'm going to share my screen. Just bear with me quickly. We don't have a PowerPoint presentation. We're actually sharing a web-based story map. And I know I figured this out last time. Sorry again. Oh, here we go. It's right there in the middle. All right, are we live? Everyone can see the story map here? Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Issa Crum. I work with Ironwood Consulting. Tonight, we are excited to present to the trustees and those that have joined an interim deliverable, which includes the results of our wetland inventory for the town of Silverton as an ArcGIS story map. This is a platform that allowed us to create an interactive and engaging narrative that combines maps, photographs, and other multimedia and text to illustrate our findings. I'm going to walk you through this draft version of the Silverton Wetlands Story Map to guide you through the key outcomes from our fall aerial and field-based wetland delineation and mapping efforts. The story map touches briefly on the core objectives and methods that we presented to the trustees in our last presentation. And I'll go a bit more into depth regarding the various data sources we reviewed, the wetland inventory results themselves, a bulleted discussion of outcomes and considerations, and some recommendations. It is our goal to provide a web-based solution for public viewing, and it is our hope to make the story map accessible for a wide audience that might be interested in learning more about wetlands within the town limits. So without further ado, I'd like to walk you through the story map. Feel free to interrupt with questions. This isn't a formal presentation, and it's hopefully meant to be interactive with everyone. So if you were sent a link to the story map, you'll notice if you plug that link into your browser, you'll land on the homepage here. The way that story maps work, it's sort of a scroll-based platform. So as you scroll down, you'll notice that this navigation bar emerges at the top here. These are active links, so you can jump down to different parts of the story map. The first section, again, it provides our preliminary observations. This was pulled from that PowerPoint presentation that we gave last month. On the right, you'll see this map. This is an ArcGIS based platform, so it allows us to pull in these ArcGIS-based shape files into this interactive map. And here we are showing our preliminary findings, areas where we have mapped wetland boundaries in blue. You'll also see some orange crosses or X's on here. Those are locations where we collected a wetland data point. So that's additional information onto a data form that is provided by the Army Corps of Engineers in one of their manuals. And then you'll see these little purple dots. Those are locations where we might have marked a location of a culvert or another stormwater infrastructure type feature or other elements of note. The other cool thing about this, if you were to click on one of these features, this pulls directly from those ARC-based shapefiles, so it contains additional attributes about that wetland feature. So it's kind of a cool presentation tool. Sorry. All right. So
Also, sorry to interrupt here. I just want to say that it's actually square meters and not square miles on the thing we just on the thing that just popped up. So we'll correct that in the final version. So apologies for that.
Good catch.
Yeah.
Again, we should have draft written on the top here. So we welcome feedback. And if you catch little things like that, please let us know. As you continue to scroll down, we get into our project objectives. Again, this is kind of pulled from that presentation that we provided to the trustees in December. We present various data sources that we reviewed prior to doing our field-based assessments, which included the National Wetland Inventory, high resolution imagery we obtained from CDOT, historic imagery, parcel boundaries, hydrologic units, and then we were also able to obtain copies of approved jurisdictional determinations. Sorry, this should be determinations that were issued by the Army Corps of Engineers within the town boundaries. So those are these green crosses that you see here. I think there are 9 total that have been issued within the town limits. Some of these have expired. These approved jurisdictional determinations are valid for a 5-year term. And I'm not sure what, we don't have. This just contains the Army Corps tracking number on there. But again, this is a legend that describes the different features that you see on the map here. These are features from USGS, the National Hydrography Data Set, which includes stream and river features and other open water bodies, and then the National Wetland Inventory mapping data. If we continue on, this map here illustrates the mapping approach for the different features we mapped within the town limits. So again, due to access constraints, many of these features are located on private parcels. We attempted to access areas that were on town-owned easements to do data collection, and we're able to map the edges of wetlands in the field. And then to map the entirety of these features, we relied on aerial imagery and vegetation signatures. So you'll see there's kind of a mix of different approaches for these different features. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so if I'm clearing my throat and coughing, I apologize. And then finally, we get into our results, and this is where all the cool stuff happens. In addition to mapping wetlands, we classified wetland features by hydrogeomorphic classification type and coordinate classification. This would commonly be done if you were to map wetlands for the Army Corps of Engineers. The HGM classification, this hydrogeomorphic classification, is a method that was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and it incorporates the geomorphic setting, water source, and hydrodynamics to understand the characteristics of a wetland. This particular classification was used to develop some of the very early functional assessment methods that the Army Corps used, and is kind of a framework for some of the more complicated assessment methods. Within the town limits, we generally characterize or classified wetlands under 3 types. Riverine wetlands are those that are associated with stream or river bodies and are supported primarily by overbank flows. Slope wetlands are generally the groundwater dependent systems, and then depressional features are generally supported entirely by surface water as their primary water source.
Quick question, Isa, could you, for folks that might be listening, clarify or define geomorphic and hydrodynamics?
Absolutely. So geomorphic setting again, kind of you could think of this as the location on the landscape. So is that wetland situated in a floodplain setting, which would be typical of our riverine systems? Is it situated in an inland area that's more isolated and influenced by surface topography? So these would be your depressional wetlands, and then slope wetlands. Despite their name, slope wetlands aren't always found on hill slopes. You could find features such as fens, and slope wetlands tend to be wetland systems that are associated with headwaters of stream systems. I'm not sure why they call them slope wetlands, but they do sometimes occur on more like hillside features. And then again, the hydrodynamic that really describes that that primary water source. So what is the main water source that's supporting that wetland system? Is that helpful?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, and then we get into our coordinate classification. This is the classification system that you'll see used in the National Wetland Inventory. It was developed by Fish and Wildlife Service. The Army Corps of Engineers also relies on this classification system, mainly for the purpose of determining mitigation ratios and deciding on what mitigation might be needed. That's due to the fact that some systems might require more time to recover from an impact. If you were to recreate that system, the Army Corps refers to this as a temporal loss. So they generally rely on this classification when they're considering those mitigation ratios. In the town, we map two primary coordinate sites.
Your audio went out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
It's buzzing now.
Very buzzy here.
Okay, I'm gonna unplug my headphones.
We can hear I can hear it pretty clearly over the computer. I'm wondering if it's the town's audio.
It seemed to be corrected when you adjusted your plugs. Oh, lost you.
How's
There you are.
that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to turn up my audio here. Hold on. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. If there's a little feedback, I apologize.
There isn't. All good.
Okay, getting into coordinate. I don't know how much of what I said was captured by the audience. We classified wetlands by coordinate classification, which is a system developed by Fish and Wildlife Service. And that's what you would see in NWI mapping. There are two primary coordinate classes that we mapped in the town limits. These PEM, palustrin emergent, which generally refers to a system, an inland freshwater wetland system dominated by herbaceous wetland plants. So that's the yellow areas. And then palustrin scrub shrub, inland freshwater wetland systems dominated by scrub shrub wetland plants. So you can see that those willow dominated systems are sort of the overwhelming wetland type in the town. We also considered potential jurisdiction, and by jurisdiction I mean federal Clean Water Act jurisdiction. And this is considering potential jurisdiction post Sackett versus EPA, which came out this past summer. I just will note that we do not have the authority to state whether or not a wetland is under federal jurisdiction or not, but we can provide our best professional judgment and rationale as if we were requesting confirmation from the Army Corps. So let's see on the left here, you can see that, sorry, I'll demonstrate this in a sec. Down at the bottom, here we go. Pre-Sackett wetlands on the left. So this is part of this interactive feature of the story map. If we were to slide this all the way over, this is what we assume the landscape might have looked at like pre-Sackett, with areas in blue being potential wetlands regulated under the Clean Water Act, and wetlands in red being non-jurisdictional pre-Sackett. And then post-Sackett, you see that some additional areas now light up in red since they lost that federal jurisdiction post-Sackett. And I will say that most of this is based on interpretation of the term adjacency and what that means for wetlands. Previously, wetlands that were separated by a man-made feature, such as a berm or a road, would still be considered an adjacent wetland. That's no longer true in the post-Sackett world. Then we move into our discussion. Here we're just summarizing some of our key findings. We mapped roughly 72 acres of wetlands within the town limits. Most of the wetlands that we mapped are supported by a natural water source, but potentially up to 18.5% of wetlands by acreage might be supported by an artificial water source or surface water source, including stormwater runoff. Getting into wetland jurisdiction, we estimate that potentially upwards of close to 9 acres of wetlands that were likely considered protected under the Clean Water Act may no longer be under federal jurisdiction post-Sackett. Additionally, we found that there were 9 prior approved jurisdictional determinations issued within the town limits. Several of those are still valid. And then we get a bit into how the state is approaching regulating wetlands post-Sackett. And if there's questions on that, I'm happy to answer those as well. And then we also highlight a couple of historic areas or well-known aquatic resource areas within the town. Again, this highlights the interactive feature of the web-based story map. We provide some specific information about some of these features and what makes them unique or change from perhaps their historic condition. We found that several creeks, including all the water systems in the town, have been listed for TMDLs, and the portion of Mineral Creek is listed as a 303D impaired waters. So clearly water quality is of a concern within the town. Again, some of the other notable areas, Shrine Hill Wetland Complex, the Animas River, and Cement Creek, and then the wetlands associated with Cemetery Hill. We were able to obtain some historic imagery from the Historical Society. What's interesting to note in these images is that although these are in black and white, there is some indication of areas that might have supported denser vegetation, potentially wetland features. This is the Shrine Hill area. You can see there were houses and buildings that were built up above this area that we have recognized under today's conditions as supporting potential wetlands. You can see portions of the Animas River floodplain. This is a photo from 1923. If you were sitting up on Shrine Hill, one thing to note is the absence of noticeable willows to the right. If you were sitting there today, you'd probably be seeing some evidence of that wetland complex over here. But within just 30-year time frame, this is an aerial image. If you were sitting in that same area, you could see that willow-dominated system is obviously there. Again, this is black and white. It's hard to tell exactly if these are in fact willows, but this certainly resembles a historic wetland feature. And then if you were to look at that same area in 1990, you can see clear evidence of that wetland complex there. And this just kind of highlights that and wetlands can form in short periods of time. They can also persist over long periods of time. So it's nice to have some historical reference. We then get into our study recommendations for the upcoming growing season and moving forward. It is our goal to assess the wetland conditions in this upcoming growing season using the CNHP Ecological Integrity Assessment Rapid Assessment Protocol. We hope to help the town continue efforts towards development of a wetland protection program that's consistent with best available wetland conservation science to support a resilient and functional urban ecological interface. We discussed potentially the utility of some of our mapping efforts of the wetland inventory and supporting development of a robust stormwater and runoff management plan. And then hopefully these data can serve to help identify areas within the town where wetland restoration can be targeted to improve functions of those existing wetlands. And then we have some lists of contributors and thank yous here at the bottom. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Yes, this is Tyler George. Can you remind us what or why you can't, it's only an estimation as to what may have been jurisdictional wetlands?
Yes, so unless an approved jurisdictional determination was issued and is valid, we're not regulators. We only interpret what the law and regulations tell us as consultants, and it's really just our job to go out there and collect whatever information we can using the guidance and manuals developed by the agencies, because they can't, they're a very small collection of folks. They can't come out to every wetland and map them all and make a jurisdictional determination. So they really rely on consultants to go out and do a lot of that field work. That's why they've put so much effort into developing these very robust manuals and supporting guidance documents so that we can go out and collect as much information as we can, which allows them to make those determinations. That approved jurisdictional determination process, so an individual from the Corps that's been assigned, usually in Colorado, they're assigned a county. They will review that request and make an initial determination. And then that actually does go on to individuals at EPA, and they have the final authority on whether or not a wetland might fall under Clean Water Act jurisdiction as a waters of the US. And then that determination is good for 5 years. Wetland systems will change considerably. So that's just sort of the benchmark that they decided upon.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. But that's
Lisa, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I just had a question. I'm trying to understand the wetlands by potential jurisdiction map to make sure I'm clearly understanding it. So the one that has the fun little scroll bar. So if I move that bar to the right and there's more blue, that is the pre-sacket, right?
Correct. This is
And then, so
pre-Sackett.
moving it to the left shows post-Sackett. The areas in red are areas that potentially would have been protected under the pre-Sackett laws.
So, and I mean, this is really the area where you notice the most change.
Yeah.
And I guess I can zoom in. I'm still using these tools or learning how to use these tools myself. So the big change you can see here, this is your pre-Sackett, and many of these wetlands, due to them being adjacent to the Animas River, and the way that the Corps might view that in the pre-Sackett landscape, there was something that they called the significant nexus test. And there's various components of that. And that significant nexus test has now been nixed. So in order to determine whether a wetland is adjacent or not, they are looking for a direct surface connection to either a wetland associated with a waters of the US or to that waters of the US itself. The Animas River, which is a tributary to the Colorado River, which is a known traditional navigable water. It's pretty safe to assume anything associated with the Animas River is going to be under Clean Water Act jurisdiction. But you'll see here, even just this little road feature, there's no longer that direct surface connection.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the area of town where the most significant change could potentially be observed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Regarding
the
jurisdictional
decision by the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court's decision is most heavily impacting that Campground Road area of town. And the red, just to like carry on with Dana's, wait, actually, do you want to just, that's correct, right, Isa?
So areas in red, we're assuming are not under Clean Water Act jurisdiction.
Right, and they weren't before the decision, and they have, like, then if we go over to the Shrine Hill area, or even just above the road, either red, it doesn't matter. The reds that aren't changing are areas that are identified as wetland, but not protected under the Supreme Court decision before or after.
Correct. And there's various Supreme Court decisions over the years. They like to call this, it's waters of the U.S. Ping pong.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's been a multiple clean water rules. I mean, just in the past decade, it's the whiplash effect. So some of these, which we do address this somewhat in our data. Some of these features, principally a few of these here, which are in the Animas River floodplain, would have likely been considered waters of the US under the Obama Clean Water Rule. That was valid in the state of Colorado for a short period. And then that was done away with the Navigable Waters Protection Rule. And that was active in Colorado for a brief period. And then we went back to what we call the pre-2015 rule, which relied on that significant nexus determination. And now, as of this past year, I guess officially September, we're now operating under the post-Sackett landscape, where there's no longer the significant nexus test. So they look at this, they call a relatively permanent standard, and this new understanding of what adjacent means for wetlands. So that means that many stream systems as well are ephemeral and intermittent stream systems. There's question as to whether or not those systems are under Clean Water Act jurisdiction now.
Do we
Because
have
of-
examples of those in our outline here?
We don't. The stream systems within the town are all perennial systems. Where that could come into play if you were to have tributary streams that directly connected to Mineral Creek, the upper portion of those streams, which might only flow during the early part of the growing season. They really rely on, so this is where slope wetlands are really important because those tend to be associated with those headwater streams, and some of those systems are certainly going to lose federal protection because of that relatively permanent standard. But I don't have an example of that in a town. The Shrine Hill wetlands, as far as we're aware, there's never been a direct connection to the Animas River or to Mineral Creek. It seems like the water that does daylight from these systems gets held in these wetland complexes. Some of the wetlands that we see forming down here are probably partially being supported by water that's daylighting from the Shrine Hill wetlands and being captured in roadside ditches. So that's part of why we went through the effort of mapping out all the culverts to try to understand the various flow paths that might be supporting some of these wetlands and to help us make sense of that. Any more questions?
Can you clarify a little bit about how this discussion relates to anything at the state level? Because I saw the bullet point in there that was really helpful about there's like a project notification process, I think was how it was mentioned. And so I guess I'm just wondering, like, kind of regardless of whatever we end up doing moving forward, how does our planning process and now these maps relate to any sort of state notification requirement for a landowner?
That's a great question. And this will hopefully become better understood as time goes on. This policy CW17, that was something that was rolled out right after the Sackett decision came down. The state has been sort of preparing for this post-Sackett reality, knowing that this could be a potential reality. The state of Colorado does have a no net loss policy, which protects waters of the state. Waters of the state include any surface water and groundwater within the state of Colorado. The Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is the entity that is charged with protecting waters of the state. That's usually done so through their stormwater permitting program or through our water quality permits, which are issued with Clean Water Act permits. So that's under the Clean Water Act Section 401 program. In short, what this policy states is that the state of Colorado may execute enforcement discretion, meaning that if you were to put fill into a waters of the state, that you should notify the state that you are doing so. And this allows them the opportunity to evaluate potential water quality implications associated with that discharge. If you were to place fill into a waters of the state and not notify CDPHE, then they could technically fine or cite you for not notifying them. It's my understanding that they will only be exercising enforcement discretion for waters and wetlands that are what they call gap waters. So these are wetlands and waters that lost federal protection due to the Sackett decision. They aren't going to go after folks for discharging into wetlands that were likely never considered waters of the US. They're also not likely to go after small offenders. They're really looking to prevent losses of significant headwater stream systems, larger wetland areas that may have lost federal protection. So it's kind of it's still a bit of an unknown. What I would advise a landowner that has, you know, a potential wetland on their property that they're seeking to build a home on, that they should consult a wetland consultant, or even reach out to someone at the state. There are very few people that are currently managing these sort of requests. So I would guess, again, they're really just looking for these larger projects, and again, just those systems that lost federal protection. So in terms,
yeah, that's helpful. Thank you for clarifying that.
sure.
Any other trustee questions or discussion?
I guess I'm just kind of wondering like what this means for, like, let's say a landowner opens up this story link and they look at it, like, what does that mean for them?
What I hope that they might take away from this is that, I mean, first they'll get a better understanding of what this project is. It's probably hard to, if it's just by word of mouth or just knowing that the town is interested in creating an inventory of wetlands and potentially rolling out a wetland protection program. It gives people the opportunity to learn a bit more about wetlands in the town. Some other municipalities, towns are showing wetlands that they've mapped within their limits in sort of a similar capacity, certainly not as detailed as what we're showing here. Generally, they're just showing these are the locations of wetlands. And in many cases, they have also incorporated some sort of a wetland condition or function that is associated with a wetland. And those ratings might be used to determine what a setback width might look like, or in some cases, it might determine what sort of mitigation is required. That's an approach that they're taking in the town of Crested Butte, for example. So higher quality wetlands, they require a much higher mitigation. They assign a higher mitigation value, and they actually assign a dollar amount. And we realize this is a lot of information, but and that's what we're hoping that the town can help us understand what you feel is appropriate just based on the feedback that you've received from members of the public so far. I find all of this to be valuable. I geek out on this stuff, so I might be a little biased on that part, but I think the real take-home message here is that it's really important for landowners to understand the various constraints before developing on their land, whether that be a wetland or they're in a high avalanche risk or high liquefaction. These are all different things to consider before you're building a home. And just knowing that even if absent of what the town decides to do going forward, there's still processes in place that a landowner needs to follow through on before developing on their land. They need to get that approved jurisdictional determination from the Corps if it hasn't been received already, and they need to understand more as to whether or not a wetland on their property could be subject to this new policy that CDPHE has passed in the last year.
And is there a map that shows the relative quality of the wetlands, Isa?
That's the next step.
Next step, yes. So that's where this coming spring we'll be
With the
going
additional
back out.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that will be, I mean, maybe that'll be important information for members of the community, but I think that will really help the town decide how you want to move forward. Again, with your, if you decide to go with a wetland protection program, this might open the door for some future funding opportunities for restoration. I think in our proposal, we touched on a grant opportunity from EPA. I think that comes around every 3 years, and they're seeking to help support exactly this kind of work, whether that be restoration or wetland protection program or wetland inventory and assessment type work.
Great. Thank you very much. Any final thoughts or comments from trustees? Well, Isa, Emily, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for this very helpful presentation. I guess one quick question is, when could the members of the public anticipate this story website becoming available?
That's a good question. This is Emily. If you guys have any feedback on the substance or content here, you can provide that to us. There's a few little minor changes I noticed as we were going through, just typo things, and we can publish it, give you guys a permanent link. We also have a GIS package and all of the data sheets, the U.S. Army Corps data sheets that we filled out to pass over to the town as well for them to use in planning purposes, land use code, that kind of stuff. So, but I guess within 2 weeks, potentially, within 2 weeks, we can have this finalized if there aren't any huge substantive comments from you guys.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thanks for all this work, and have a great rest of the night.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
All right. We'll now move on to item 4A of our agenda, new business, sewer collection system rehabilitation, USDA loan resolution. Oh, and just to note, Melina is trying to get this room a little bit warmer, so she's not able at this moment to remove the screen share, but I believe we've got John Seitz and Gloria as presenters with respect to this topic. There we go.
And I'm going to try not to use my voice too much, but this is a very exciting project because we did receive half of it is grant funded and the other half is a low interest loan from USDA to replace our collection system. Our collection system is the pipes that run to our sewage pipes that run to our lagoon system. It's the first step in replacing it. And you'll see in your packet that there's some numbers that I threw out, kind of preliminary numbers on how this might affect, how the loan might affect future rates. But that will ultimately be determined in our rate study.
Great. Thank you very much. John, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just that this particular application process has been going on for a couple of years now. It's been a quite a task to get through their funding process. And the grant that they're offering us is an exceptional one for their program. They were sure to let us know that when they offered it. And I think it's a great opportunity and the right step, a step in the right direction towards getting our wastewater system back where it needs to be.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. You've definitely put a lot of work into making this happen, so we are very appreciative. Any trustee questions or discussion relating to the grant and loan?
So exciting to see this on the agenda, John and Gloria. I know, Gloria, you can't sound as excited as I know you are, but it's been a long time coming, I think, to know what this actually would look like. And my initial thought was like, this is really great for the town. This is a huge grant and a really great loan rate. So I thought this was really helpful. And I was just curious, John and Gloria, how you feel about the project timeline. You know, a lot of the requirements, this is a really big project. And so kind of how you and the team and just staff capacity are feeling, all the right-of-way stuff, the risk and resilience planning, the auditing and financial reporting, the Build America, Buy America requirements, just checking in on kind of making sure that you're asking us for what you need to make this successful.
I'll take that one. I really don't, this is something that we need to do. We need to make this happen for the community, for public health. And I believe that the capacity is in a better place than it has been in a long time. After the approval of the Public Works Administrative Coordinator, who starts tomorrow, I feel really good about our capacity between Gloria and myself and Steve Mead. And with respect to the timeline, we would expect to start construction this year and phase it over 2 years. And I believe that the deadline is December 31st of 2026. I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that we have until the end of 2026 if we can't get it done in the next 2 seasons.
Great.
It's pretty exciting to see nearly $5 million of funding available for our community. I know that we spent a number of years just talking about the size of the infrastructure work we had left and the dollar amounts and not really knowing how we were going to fund them. So seeing a very large chunk of it get solved for is exciting. Tyler, Jim, anything to add or any questions or comments?
No, I looked through it. It looks great. And yeah, again, just to echo what everybody else has already said. Great work. That was a real nice thing to see in the packet, was having this amount of money coming in and letting us get started on this. So
thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the USDA loan resolution and accept a $2.165 million loan for the purpose of rehabilitating the sewage collection system?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Cranker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Birma? Yes. Trustee George?
yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Thank you, Gloria.
5 mil, cool, 5 mil. Way to go.
All right, the next item on our agenda is new business item 4B, which relates to the dump truck financing.
Sure, I can kick this one off if Gloria may want to chime in on the financing. We actually found some better rates today through Bank of San Juan's. So what we're looking at here is a third dump truck to add to our fleet. We've been looking for a while. They don't grow on trees. Good ones for a good price. Did a lot of research talked to local contractors, mechanics, and we believe we've got a good local purchase here, a vehicle that has been maintained by our primary diesel mechanic for several years. It had an engine replaced in 2022 to the tune of over $40,000. We believe that this is a fair price. We've looked it over, driven it. It's got some great features on it that our older trucks don't have, including an automatic transmission, which is nice for our younger drivers that have not had the joy of growing up with a stick shift and are quite challenged at times driving a 13-speed transmission. But I believe this is a great opportunity for us to expand our capacity, save us some money on contractors. As you saw, our expenses on contractors last year were, because of the great deal of snow that we moved, were pretty high. And a lot of that was trucking, if not the vast majority of it. So I think I feel comfortable about making this recommendation. And I don't know if you all have more questions about this, but I'll be glad to take whatever I can.
I just want to know how the 1992 Kenworth dump truck has 900,000 miles on it.
Because we purchased that truck used, I'm not sure exactly when, maybe 20 years ago, and it was an over-the-road truck. So it was actually converted. It was a tractor-trailer tractor.
Oh.
And those trucks get a lot of miles on them. And trucks have big parts, they're maintained. You can get 1 million miles out of a big truck, no big deal.
Insane.
So that's why it has so many miles. Now our International, I believe, was purchased by the town new in the late 80s, and I'm not even sure if it has 100,000 miles on it.
Oh. Wow.
So that's
crazy.
Yeah.
I think this is great. I definitely support the purchase. I am not sure that I support the financing of it. I'm wondering if we can find the cash to buy it, because at 7.5% interest over 5 years, that's, unless I'm doing the math wrong, that's like $4,125 a year, which totals $20,625 of interest, or increases our total cost by 37.5%.
I can comment on that. Just that the rates that we got back today were a quarter of the cost down payment, 6.2%. But to answer your question, can we come up with more money to pay for more of it or all of it? That would be a question that Gloria would probably have to look into on the budget.
And I'm really not inclined on increasing our budget items at this time, and that's why we came to you all with the financing.
Or is there a split somewhere in there where for this year, and even, depending on how the budget looks over time, where that becomes something, for this year, it's financed in this way, but with the option of, paying more into it, paying down that difference in a different year's budget?
Well, we do have $40,000 set aside for equipment and improvements, or for equipment, and a big chunk of that was going to be set aside for like a CDOT auction or an opportunistic purchase for equipment that we needed. We still need a pickup truck or two, but I really think that the dump truck is the most important. I would be comfortable with taking a larger portion of that $40,000 and applying it to the dump truck. But I don't know if you'd like to see those numbers and see how things would look before we pull the trigger. Sounds like it.
I mean, I don't feel the need to ask this to rise above an admin decision and letting you and Gloria decide how best to purchase it. I was just kind of questioning the idea of spending, even at the lower interest rate with a 25% down payment, it's still $16,000 or $15,000 of interest paid relative to the $20,625 based on the initial terms, and whether or not we feel good about spending that much cash on interest relative to a $55,000 purchase price. But if that's the most efficient way for us to spend our money right now, because we need to keep more in reserve or something like, I trust you guys. I was just questioning whether or not it would make more sense to pay it with cash if we had it.
Sure.
Or
And
to just, yeah,
I'll just say
I
one
would say
thing.
pay more of it.
This opportunity came up relatively recently, and over the holidays, we didn't have as much time as we would have liked to shop, but I think that Bank of the San Juans has given us a pretty good rate compared to what we're seeing elsewhere. But I value all that, all this discussion. I guess my question would be, what is the direction, or where would you like to see us go with this?
Because my personal opinion would be go ahead and pursue it, and then just, see if this is the most efficient financing that is available to us, and whether or not there's some additional cash to put down to reduce the amount of debt with, this relatively high interest rate environment. But that I'm good with whatever you end up with. I see a lot of heads nodding. Anybody disagree or have a different idea? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase and financing of the 2006 International dump truck.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Stanker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Grandma?
Yep.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll get with Gloria and we'll see if we can't do better. Try to get it a little bit more financially in our favor, and play with the numbers and see what looks best. But we do have that 40,000, and I feel comfortable spending a little bit more of that. So thank you.
Nice. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next item on our agenda is new business item 4C, marijuana tax ballot issue discussion.
This is an attempt to create more revenue for the town. So marijuana sales is currently taxed for the whole state at 15%. Local municipalities can tax on top of that, or they can do like a fee structure on top of that as well. And that's kind of what I demonstrated with to you all in the packet with the Excel sheet that you all have in there. That was provided by the Colorado Municipal League. And as you can see, some of our neighboring communities, such as Durango, charges an extra 3% tax on top of their on top of that 15%, going back to the municipality. Some of the fee schedule. So this is something we had talked about in the finance committee before. I actually had drafted this ballot language, but hadn't gotten the timing right to get it on an actual election. So what I'm asking from you all tonight is to consider this as maybe a ballot issue on this upcoming April election.
What are the parameters around how we can allocate the increased revenue if we choose 3%, 4%, or 5% tax?
So it used to just be for law enforcement, but the new statutes say that you can use it for into your general fund.
Okay, thank you.
You have a preference for how it's allocated? Do you have a-
I was just curious what limitations were there, you know. We're gonna make it more expensive.
Mhm.
What can it actually go to?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think for me, this makes a lot of sense to put before the voters. I mean, then it's up to them to decide. It's pretty clear that a variety of our neighboring communities do this. We don't have in here, but URA does 5%. And so in ways that we're talking about funding a variety of things that are important to the community and the board, it seems like this is a perfectly reasonable thing to put before the voters and let them decide.
Mhm.
Any other comments? If we do move forward with this, I think we have to, Gloria, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to pick the percentage
Mhm.
that we would like drafted. And so it'd be helpful to get some, it sounds like the board's in support of considering this as a ballot issue. So I guess the next question is, do we have consensus on a percentage amount?
Mhm. So Durango does 3, Uray does 5, and then Bayfield and Peonia do a dollar amount.
And there can also be, there can also be a kind of a phased approach where where the voters can approve up to a certain amount. And then the municipality would then impose up to that amount. So they could say, up to 5%, and we'll just do 3%, but have that flexibility if we ever needed to go up to 5. That all needs to be approved by the voters. As you'll see on that spreadsheet, some of the municipalities have done a kind of a fee, kind of like we do with a lodging fee, where for every transaction, there's I think Bayfield has that where it's $10 added to every transaction, which seems a little steep to me, but that's also a structure that we can use as well. That does not need to go to the voters. But the tax would.
Is there any, I see some of these counties have, municipalities have sales tax and some have excise tax and some have both. Is there any discussion on which one is better or preferable or the differences?
Well, now, so the sales tax is the retail sales tax. So if you're selling to the public, and then the excise tax is if a grow facility is selling to a retail establishment.
So all we have in town is retail.
Yeah, but we do have in San Juan County an excise tax as well.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
I think if we come up with a percentage number that we can agree upon, I think that whatever that number is, we should just put to the voters, and then that should be the number, rather than saying, we'll let you vote on this, and then we'll decide how much of it we're going to tax. Like if we say we want, or if we put 5% in the language and the voters vote to approve 5%, I think we should go with 5%, rather than saying we're going to start at 2% and go from there.
I like that too, Tyler, because it also just means like we don't, it's not further prolonging discussion of the issue.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're not also making arbitrary decisions up to the amount. This is what was agreed upon. This was what was voted upon. And then we support whatever our voters decide.
Yeah. It seems like in the table, the most common is 5 with a lot of 3s. Someone's up to 18%. That's like, wow. Okay.
I think the 18% and the $10 fees are like deterrent measures where there are communities that didn't really support having marijuana stores, but they're like, if you want to do it.
Incentives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like 3 and 5 is really common.
And just for clarification, this is on top of the 10.4% existing sales tax.
So this is on top of the 15% sales tax from the state.
Because it's
Um,
the
Retail
not-
marijuana sales tax for the state is
Wow.
15%.
So if we went with 5%, the end result would be a 20% tax on marijuana sales. It's a big tax.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Throw out a number. What's the number?
You said 3 and 5% are common. What about 3%? Hmm.
And we currently have a 1% tax. Does it, do we know how we came to that number, or was that just an arbitrary decision made by the previous board, or is that a minimum that we have to have, or?
I couldn't find, no, there's no minimum that you would have to have, but I couldn't find any details on why it was just the 1%. I think I've heard that it was so that we could be like attracting people here to buy it, because it would be a less of a tax, but I don't know if that's true or not. And then the numbers in your packet are based off of 2 marijuana establishments in town, and potentially we would have 3.
Have we had input from any of those establishments?
We have not yet. This
So
is
if-
the first discussion. I definitely didn't want to approach them without talking to you all first.
So in 2023, we got around $15,000 of sales tax revenue from the 1% tax. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So we have 3. Do we have 3 marijuana dispensaries in town, or is it 2 in town and 1 in the county?
We will have 3.
There will be 3.
There's
So
2 now,
there-
but with
There's 2 now. So the
many?
2 combined had $1.54 million of revenue. We are isolated, so I don't know that increasing this is gonna deter
away.
people from buying marijuana products, even though it's a really steep total tax.
Would this be applied just to the 2 in town and not the 1 in the county?
Yes.
So you'd save 3% to drive up the road a little bit.
but then the gas.
Someone's out there with their calculator.
It seems like 3% is reasonable, and it's in line regionally with other places. I don't think we necessarily need to like incentivize coming to Silverton for marijuana products.
Also, I'm not really sure, like, are people coming here simply because we have cheaper marijuana? I find that hard to believe.
I don't think that Rocky Mountain High, that's not the
I'm not sure that they're, getting online and checking our tax rates.
Really wouldn't equal out.
It's really capturing the folks who are already here. The folks are here.
I'm comfortable saying yes to an increase, but I'd really like to get feedback from the 3 dispensaries before we pick a number and just find out if they're like, if they're saying like, or at least we can assess whether or not their feedback sounds reasonable, like, we're not gonna be able to survive here, nobody's gonna buy from us, or they're like, yeah, it just gets passed, like similar to the lodging fees, we were like, okay, let's increase it just gets passed on to the tourists, like, that's fine. So I'd be curious to get that feedback before I make a percentage vote. But do we have time to do that if we push this one more meeting, or are we needed to be able to vote on the language at the next meeting?
That was yes, so we'll need to vote on the language next meeting, but what I could do is reach out to the establishments currently here and get feedback, draft something and present all that to you at the next meeting. And that, I mean, it would just be a simple administrative, number change during that meeting if you guys felt like you needed to change it.
Okay, awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
There is also a comment period. If you do decide to put it on the ballot and it becomes a taper election, there is a period of time for us to collect comments from the public.
Got it.
Nice.
That would start on February the 15th, if we did.
And then this would be on the April ballot.
Mhm.
Thank you, clerk. Very helpful.
So for the language that's prepared, do we want to go with 3, 4, or 5? There was an early push for 5, then it seemed like a later lean towards
Or wait, can
3.
it just
There's also 4 in the middle. I don't care. I think
3.5?
There's also, the temp
Could
decimal.
we use decimal?
3.5.
But could it? I agree with Tyler that having the number on the ballot is important, but for the purpose of discussion, could it just be a blank and then we have the discussion and then at the conclusion of that, we've determined the number? Or for the purpose of public comment, do we need the number to be on the materials?
You mean for the next meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I think we should put something out there
Okay.
to get feedback on.
Then I think it should be 3.
I'm good with.
Good.
Or no, the Gloria move, make it 5. And then you get more comment.
Jim's raising his hand.
Yeah, Jim?
Yeah, just a quick comment. If it's 1% now and we just add 4, then we're hitting that 5% mark that we were kind of discussing earlier. And it just makes it a nice even number. I say we just go with 4%, add it on top of the 1%, gives us 5 and we go forward. It's nice and easy and everyone can wrap their head around it.
That's intriguing.
We're not adding it to the 1%, placing the 1%.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with either, not like any
Make it
number. I'm comfortable with 5 for this, but I would like to make sure that
With a willingness
the
to walk
public
it back.
knows that it's kind of a placeholder 5 and we may very much drop it.
I think too, there's a philosophical discussion, which is why maybe the feedback from the dispensaries is helpful, is that we're a tiny town. We, as year-round locals, often have to pay for a variety of services that support a variety of folks who come and visit. We had this discussion about lodging tax. When it comes to the marijuana tax, however, how much is coming locally? How much is this a locals tax and how much is this a visitor's tax? Because I think that does sometimes make a difference. And obviously that, whatever. But I just think it's important to maybe get a little bit of that nuance from the dispensaries that maybe Gloria is able to.
Yeah, do they have like 100 regulars?
Let the locals get their weed.
That's not what I said. I just said it's a locals tax or is it a visitor tax?
I think we might get more discussion too if we put it at 5% and express a willingness to be flexible about that.
Jim says 5. Tyler, what, you feel okay?
I think 5 is fine.
All right, let's go with the 5 for discussion purposes. Would someone like to make a motion about this?
So to clarify for Clayton or Gloria, we can make a motion accepting the proposed.
I'm sorry, it's just a direction. So
Oh,
take it back.
it's just direction.
So would you like to go ahead and state the direction?
So to clarify, the direction is to accept the proposed draft ballot language with inserting an increase from 1% to 5%, subject to input from our local retailers and to be put on the meeting agenda for next meeting. Does that make sense?
That works.
And can we replace in the suggested language, it says with all tax revenues to be spent on law enforcement? Can we change that or at least take that out since we are now allowed to put it into our general fund?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would recommend, I will have to double check that with the TABOR regulations, because if you do propose an increase tax, typically you do need to define where it goes to. So I will have to double check that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much for a great discussion. The next item on our agenda is new business item 4D. which is Historic Review Committee's recommendation to remove the Builder's Handbook reference from the A-Rod ordinance. And would you like to cover that, Lucy?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll let you expand. But at their first meeting on December 20th, the newly established Historic Review Committee made a motion to recommend to the board the deletion of any mention of the Builder's Handbook within the Architectural Review Overlay District Code, also known as A-Rod. The Builder's Handbook, also known as the Architectural Design Standards for Historic Districts and the Historic Design Standards Booklet, which will now just be referred to as the Builder's Handbook moving forward, was created by a group in town to create design parameters for people applying for exterior renovations or new builds within the historic overlay district. However, that language got put into the A-Rod code when that was established, and committee members discussed that they believe that it was not the intent of the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees to expand the parameters of the Historic Review Overlay District to the A-Rod, but rather to create a light version with less stringent requirements while still requiring an exterior design review. The committee believes that removing the requirement from the A-Rod code is the first step to addressing this issue, and then there will be long-term changes that will be addressed and recommended during the code update. So if the board were to direct staff to move forward with this, and everything went according to plan, and you all liked the first draft of the ordinance, the earliest that this would be enacted would be March 27th. And so A-Rod applicants who submit before March 27th would still be required to follow the A-Rod, the current A-Rod code, which requires them to comply with the Builder's Handbook. And I'll pass over to Shane since he was there to fill in anything I may have missed.
Yeah, no, that was really great. I was just going to provide a little bit more historical context. And I don't think it was intentional, but we have some really good discussion arc here, because what caused us to somewhat hastily adopt the A-Rod was the discussion around the Kind Castle sign and design that was proposed on Green Street that we realized we didn't really have anything in our code, since they were just outside of the historic district, that allowed the Planning Commission or the board to really reject something that looked very, very different than everything else in Silverton. And they were proposing like a castle facade with a bright, large neon sign as a dispensary. And so the board reacted by developing the A-Rod and drafting the ordinance for the A-Rod that was supposed to, as Lucy said, have a lesser set of restrictions than the historic district, but still give the town and planning commission some additional teeth to make sure that we had cohesiveness in Silverton. But like Lucy said, I think that the reference to the Builder's Handbook was kind of inadvertent, and the effect is making the A-Rod essentially have all of the same requirements as the historic district, and that I don't believe was our intent at the time. And by removing this, there's still a bunch of other steps and guidelines for the A-Rod, so it doesn't gut the idea of the A-Rod.
And it sounds like as part of the code rewrite and the role of the Historic Review Committee, just generally in terms of reviewing applications, there won't be like a permanent vacuum of lack of guidelines and regulations around renovations and new builds in the A-Rod.
Correct. Yeah. If you review the A-Rod code at the bottom, there's its own set of regulations. And so that's what would be used to review applications after March 27th if this goes forward.
Which probably also needs to be looked at pretty carefully by the board and the Historic Review Committee. There's things that say like the facade needs to appear to be in 25, like it needs to look like a 25-foot wide building and not a 50-foot wide building. And there's other things like that that are supposed to create cohesiveness that I'm not sure are totally accurate based on what town currently looks like. But yeah, there's a bunch of requirements.
I think this makes a ton of sense and will help streamline while also preserving the cohesiveness. So it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think again, it says right there, the long-term changes will be recommended during the code update. So I think this is just kind of a near-term fix to make the AROD more in line with the original intention. And then we'll have a bit more direction as we move into the code rewrite.
As a quick additional piece of context, there are a handful of pending applications that have met all of the requirements of the historic, that are working as if they need to meet all of the historic district requirements and not the lessened AROD requirements. And so this change doesn't very much impact anything that's currently will be in front of the historic review committee or the board.
Because again, they're operating because it still has that language in there. Yeah.
But we've let people know that this is a topic and to follow along and to see what the board does and to let them know that if that's not something that they want to do, they can follow along and watch the board make these decisions and decide to pull their application for now. So far, no one has wanted to do that. So.
Jim or Tyler?
I don't really have much to add on this topic.
Okay, then I think it says to give direction to remove the mention of the builder's handbook, which I support.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Just quick, any objections to that? Wonderful. Okay, the next item, any questions? Are you all good?
No, that sounds great. This will be straightforward.
All right, the next item on our agenda is consideration to approve the consent agenda items.
I just want to call it something in the staff report from Sarah's report, or are you? Maybe
Wait, we're not there yet.
Sorry. Yep. Let's stay on the agenda.
I know you get excited about that.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Kränker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Birma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Berman?
Yes. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to staff reports.
I can answer any questions that you guys might have.
I was just gonna say for Sarah's report, I've just gotten great feedback on Kendall and all the signage and the flagging and the fencing and just to the whole Kendall team there with Malcolm and then Sarah's work. And then also just I had a resident approach me saying, is the groomer gonna get fixed? And if it's not gonna get fixed, I will pay for it to get fixed. So I just wanted to reiterate how great the groomer is for quality of life. This was an older resident who really likes to walk the groom trails. And so I assured her that it was getting fixed and it will be back in operation, but just wanted to put a shout out to John's team and Sarah's team that those services are really helpful for the community and appreciated and noticed. And, you know, sometime if the town can't afford it, maybe residents do want to donate. I don't know. That came up.
I think it's fixed.
It is. It's fixed. Yes, I assured her it was fixed.
Yeah, okay.
Would you like an election update? Yeah.
Sure.
Great.
Our nomination petition window is open. We have had several people come and pull for trustee, four people have pulled for trustee, 2 for mayor. It will be open until January 22nd. That is the deadline to return your petitions to me, and affidavits. Elections on April 2nd, first Tuesday, not the second Tuesday, the first Tuesday. That's all.
When does and you might know the answer, not know the answer off the top of your head, but when does the transition take place from this board to the new board following the April 2nd election?
That's a good one.
Could we do that update at the next one?
I'll find out for you.
Cool, thank you.
I'm gonna make plans for that night, just immediately following.
I assume it would be right after, but
I remember when we came in, it was at the April meeting, we had like the send off of the old trustees and but we were on Zoom, so it was super weird and strange.
I thought we had one in-person meeting and then COVID happened.
I think we came, I have a very strong recollection.
But
Because I was sitting on my bed, I didn't really get the whole thing at the time and my back was aching by the end of the meeting and I was like, well, I cannot do this.
So the first meeting in April would be the 8th and the second would be the 22nd. So I assume at one of those, but I'll find out.
Nice.
Thank you very much for that update.
I wanted to call out something in the staff reports. The climate action survey QR code is in there to get feedback on the regional climate action plan. And I did try that survey and I just kind of wanted to toss out there. It's kind of tricky. It's a little strange. And I'm pretty informed on a lot of the things, and I was not totally sure how to click around in there, and I was doing it on my phone, but it seems like still an important way for people to participate and make their voices heard. So I just want to acknowledge it was a little tricky, but it's in there. And then my other call out, just because I'm gonna look for as many opportunities to say this between now and April 8th or 22nd, and that is the CPS report had a list of active development applications and inquiries, and one of those is on Green Street, and it is for a residence to be for a residence to be constructed to remove the existing residence and construct a new single-family residence on 3 lots that would be between 3,500 and 4,000 square feet. And I think that's probably the biggest single-family residence we would see in our town. So we don't have a maximum square footage ordinance right now, and I don't know if that's something that would be different because that's on Main Street. That's on Green Street, and so it would be in that zone. And so maybe that's different, but I think it's just worth mentioning and highlighting that I don't think it's going to go away. And it's something that I think that we need to consider as a community.
Great.
That's it for me.
Anything else on staff reports? Awesome. Great job, staff, as always. Your plate is full. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we've got committee and board reports. First one is Historic Review Committee. We had the meeting on December 20th that we were just talking about. In addition to the A-Rod code update, community planning strategies, and Lucy prepared a really cool kind of table that pulled all of the code requirements relating to the historic district and the A-Rod out of the code and made it in a much more digestible form that might be helpful for the board to look at as well. And I think the committee decided that they wouldn't be using that to review applications, but that it was a very helpful tool to help visualize what all of the requirements were and how they fit into the different categories, rather than having to like keep that chunk of the code like pulled up or memorized. There was also a really good discussion distinguishing the role of that committee relative to the planning commission, and that the idea isn't to duplicate the purpose of the property, but simply to consider the aesthetic and whether or not it fits within either the AROD or the historic district visual requirements. So in terms of the use of the building, whether it's commercial or residential or mixed use, and all that other stuff that the planning commission usually does, like they will still be the primary body that considers and recommends things related to that. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Cool. We adopted bylaws, we appointed chair and other official titles, and we set our meeting schedule.
Exciting.
Good work.
It was a really good discussion with a dynamic group of people that I think represent a diverse group of citizens, which is cool.
Cool. Very historic in here. It's like living history.
And then the other committee meeting sort of board report is 7B Silverton Housing Authority, which we just had. Well, I guess that says the 3rd. Did we have another meeting on the 3rd in addition to the one today?
For the housing authority?
Yeah. I don't think so.
No,
I don't know.
I'm not part of the housing authority.
That's a typo. That should be the 8th. But we just had a meeting earlier this evening for the Silverton Housing Authority. And would someone else like to talk for a few minutes about what we talked about?
Definitely not me.
Anna?
Talk a lot. We got a great update from Ann Chase, and I think it's some exciting news about some of the progress with some big projects. So in particular, we got an update on the housing lottery. There were 3 qualified applicants for the single family housing lottery in Anvil, and there are 3 homes. So that worked out well. I think it's exciting to see us, you know, being able to create some housing for folks that live and work in our community. We got a couple updates on some grants, and I think overall, just the main update for the public is just to see the variety of ways that we are moving forward with a variety of policies and actual projects to address affordable housing. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I know for some folks it feels slow because it's like, where's the unit they can move into? But to just get our ducks in a row as far as land development and kind of pre-development planning and the grant funding that we need to make all this happen. I think it's exciting to see it happen in the short period that the housing authority has been in effect. So I think that's exciting. Good partnership with the county as they provided a grant match for one of the grants. And we drafted an IGA between the town and the housing authority, just to make sure that everything is official and documented as far as the relationship between the town and the town housing authority, Silverton Housing Authority. Let me look at my notes, see if there's anything else I missed. A group of up to 8 of us will be going to a meeting that Community Builders is actually a training that Community Builders is hosting. We were asked to apply and we were accepted for that. So it will be several folks from the town, from San Juan Development Association, and I think we'd be interested in some other public representatives, especially folks who might be local builders or individuals knowledgeable about real estate development in town or realtors. And so the purpose of this training, which is in March, is to develop like a strategic plan for the housing authority. So I think we'll really be able to use it as the official housing authority body. We are sending some representatives to this training to have an outcome of a strategic plan. And then that strategic plan will help, I think, identify the top priorities for the future for the housing authority. And I think that'll be really great to have in place because I think it positions us for additional grant funding, it positions us for technical assistance and those kinds of things. So if anybody is interested, they could get in touch with Ann Chase, regarding potentially being a part of that team. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. That's a high level overview.
Thank you. Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is trustee reports.
I don't have much of a report, but I kind of want to put a plug for the ski race at Kendall on Saturday, open to the community, super fun. The ski team is going to have one practice before the race, so it'll just be like loose and free for everybody. And registration is at 8 o'clock, and then we'll have a little racer meeting after that, and then racing begins like between 9 and 10. So you can come and participate, or you can just come and bring a cowbell and cheer everybody on. And I think KSJC radio PA system will also be there, which is so fun, and I think will bring vibe. So
nice.
Yeah. Kind of snuck up on me. That's why I need to say it tonight.
All right. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is continued business 9A, sheriff budget memo. Bruce, thanks for being patient and sitting through this meeting so far. For this one, I think, why don't we have a quick discussion since we haven't convened since we received the memo, and then I would like to invite a conversation with Bruce to hopefully find a way to build this relationship to an even more positive place.
Great.
So are you asking me to leave on this stuff? No. So I thought that the board could have a quick discussion about the information received and then invite you to participate.
Sorry, what page is that memo on?
It's on page 117.
Sorry, it's 50. Marijuana stuff in there, so it'll be protected.
All good, and thanks for resubmitting.
Okay.
I'm happy to go first. I think we still have a little bit of a disconnect about what's being provided. I don't think we're actually at odds the way that perhaps our back and forth has felt. Just since it's felt like a game of telephone where we've had a discussion, asked for something, sent it through Gloria and received response from you through Gloria back to us again. And so I think from my perspective, what I was looking for was information that helped us understand the need for increased capacity, as opposed to figuring out what percentage is going to the town versus the county. I think the information in this letter that talks about the number of cases per year is helpful, but the percentages between the county, I'm not sure how that, I don't have a way to understand how that kind of relates to time spent, because it seems like, and maybe this isn't true, but it seems like, one call in the county could be 3/4 of a day, and one call in the town could be 10 minutes. And so simply comparing the number of calls town versus county doesn't help me understand how the resources are being allocated. And so what I was really hoping to find out is just how has department time increased over the years relating to the additional need for capacity and increased budget. And I'm not yet asking for feedback, because I'd like to let all the trustees kind of weigh in, but that was kind of my take on this. This is helpful, but not necessarily what I was trying to use to figure out so that I could vote yes on a budget increase. and I'll keep talking if nobody else is, just for one more second. But the other thing I saw is it seemed like in 2020, there were 278 calls, 2021, roughly the same. And then in 2022, because we don't have OHVs, it dropped down to 130. In 2023, increased quite a bit to 175, but helping us understand how the number could drop down so much, but still need increased capacity would also be super helpful. And then I guess my last specific request would be understanding how the department's resources relate to like the year-round needs. Like, do we need the full staffing in the summer and then it's really quiet in the winter, but we can't hire seasonally? That's found to be impossible. And so we need to keep on a full staff for the year, like the whole year, even though like 80% of calls are coming from the summer. Like, I would just like to understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, no seasonal.
Now I'm done talking.
I was just going to say, I did think the 10 county split at least helped me understand kind of where a lot of the sheriff's department energy is going. And I know in the past, he had mentioned that the strain and lack of capacity had been there for a few years. It wasn't like just last couple, but I would like to dig into that a little more when we get a chance to talk to him.
I think from my perspective, it seems like from our last discussion on this issue, there were kind of two pieces that it sounded like the trustees were bringing up. The first piece was, we have our contract. It'd be great to get some reporting from the sheriff's department. It seems to me like we need a little bit more teasing out on what makes sense. And Sheriff, you and I talked about this, of just like, what's the most reasonable, useful type of reporting for the board to hear? Maybe it's similar to what you showed Tony, but just having something a little bit more standard that makes sense for what the board thinks the reporting needs are and what the sheriff's department thinks is like accessible, right? Numbers that are easy to pull or information that's easy to provide. There's no need for something to be particularly onerous or for us to be asking for some obscure data point that you're like, I can't even get that. So I think there's the first piece of kind of the contract and the reporting that would be super helpful. And I think we just didn't get to have quite that discussion with you throughout the budgeting process, like maybe we would have had in previous years. And I think it's really helpful to have something kind of consistent from year to year because board members change, there's flux, there's a variety of changes. So I think you and I chatted about that. And I think that was one piece that came to my mind from the previous trustee discussion is like, hey, if we could have a conversation with the sheriff about regular reporting and kind of have that contract deliverable met, I think we would all be feeling a bit more comfortable about how the contract is laid out and what it looks like in the future. I think that was one piece. And the discussion kind of was, well, if the sheriff comes back with some of that information, that would really help us be able to kind of talk about these contract requirements being fulfilled and us knowing what we're even talking about. And then I think the second piece to what Shane is saying is kind of this idea of making the case or telling the story or making the justification for the increased staffing. And I think that's probably, it sounds like what is being asked tonight is to just hear a little bit more information about, based on some of the data, or maybe based on different information or case you want to make. I think having a better understanding of the need for the staffing, again, not to micromanage because you manage your department and you manage your staffing, but to know, I kind of was thinking about this, like if I were to go and ask for a raise to a supervisor, I typically would have to like talk about a variety of reasons why, or if my husband is doing that, make the case for like why that raise would be necessary or relevant. So I think there's just that piece. And I think for you, probably share from our conversation, you feel like you've shared that with boards in the past. I think the challenge here is you are dealing with some new board members and changes to board and staff. So I think that's probably where you feel a little bit caught in providing information in a variety of ways and in not feeling satisfactory. So just a summary, it seems like those were the two pieces: is what is the regular consistent reporting that makes sense a couple times a year per the contract, and then talking about these in particular, telling the story, making the case for that is what I was hearing. But maybe my colleagues heard something different from our previous discussion or since then.
Yeah, I thought during our last meeting, we had come to an agreement that annual reporting would be sufficient.
Yep.
So if we could, I think moving forward with that to make it less cumbersome on the department would be good. And then as far as the letter is concerned, these are the numbers that I think I was really looking for. The case numbers have gone up until this year, but also looking back at previous meetings, the sheriff has been coming in front of, at least since during my time here, he's been coming to us and warning us that, it might not be a tenable situation with the staff that he had. And yeah, so now that we've got these numbers here, this is, for me, this satisfies the sort of yearly reporting portion of the contract. So I'm not sure, aside from the citations and making sure that we make sure that we have demographics or at least contact information to make sure that we can collect properly. I feel like this is this satisfies what I had been looking for previously. So yeah, thank you.
I think my only comments are kind of in addition to what other people have brought up, is just kind of your interpretation of some of the data of just, with, I guess, with potentially extra help, would there be a more even town county split? Like, do you foresee maybe spending more time in the county if there was more resources for you to have time in the county, or is our call volume high enough in town that keeps people busy? And then it also seemed like the parking citations went up a decent amount, and I was wondering too if that's like, is it because we actually have enough people to enforce? Like, is that going to be the more average number around that 400 parking citations, or is that something that's more out of the normal than the previous, I think, 161? Or do you see that even higher if you have, another officer or resources?
Like more enforcement could be. There's capacity, yeah, with more capacity for enforcement, we may see that number go up. That would be the maximum, yeah.
Potentially, yeah. Or is that just an outlier?
Is that, yeah.
I think Jim and Sally are the only ones that haven't weighed in.
And go ahead.
Thank you. Echoing what Tyler said earlier, our sheriff has met our request with regards to the reporting. I think what we discussed earlier at our previous meeting with regards to the funds, I don't see any reason why we should hold up this process. I really don't. Moving forward in good faith and knowing that we're all going to be working together and helping this process move forward, I don't see a reason why we continue to have this discussion. I think it's great. It's healthy, but I think it's time to understand that everyone's come just far enough to meet all the demands and the requests, and I think we can move forward. I think let's go ahead and provide the funding that our sheriff has asked for, even if it is half, and then we can move on to the next topic. I mean, we could go round and round and round. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jim. Sally?
Okay, yeah. Well, I would echo a lot of what everyone has already said previously. I think reading this, Bruce, was really helpful for me to just kind of understand like an overview picture of what, like how you're calculating numbers. And I was sort of with Shane, and I wasn't so much as thinking about the justification of the split or the, how we share the budget expenses with the county, but more of a way of kind of, to Dana's point, like as the board turns over or then becomes familiar with what you're doing, and you've been doing it for over a decade now, probably, is being able to look at trends. And I think this paragraph is useful in responding to, our previous discussion. And I think just to think about it sort of, going forward, moving into the future, as boards are turning over, as your department grows and gets bigger, as the town grows and has increased needs, how can this be a document that we can see annually to make comparisons, look for trends, see patterns, kind of look at what Jordan is saying, is this, be able to ask some questions like, what's going on here? Is this because we had an increased capacity? Is this because we had just like a whole bunch of rebels show up in town? Like, is 4th of July on a Saturday this year? Or, whatever the trends and the patterns start to look like. Because I think what we're going to start to see is, as our population grows, we're going to start to see just a lot more incidences that go beyond parking citations, and your work is going to increase in complexity. So I think this is a good start, and I can see, I think these are really important numbers for us to look at. And I just wonder if the next step of it is something kind of like a spreadsheet. I mean, I'm like teetering on, I don't want to micromanage you. I don't think this needs to be cumbersome. I don't think it should be something obscure and random that like the town board makes up. I think you already know how you measure and analyze your own team. But for the purpose of spending public money, being able to see it laid out in a orderly way, in a way that tracks trends over time, I think will allow the board to make really informed decisions that we can then turn around and express to the community. Yep, this is what we saw happening with the numbers. This is where, these are we're totaling this amount of fees. This is a good investment for our community. We see the population growing. We see, OH fees are gone, but it's been replaced with an increased year-round population or a mushrooming summer seasonal. I think any of those observations would be useful in making an informed decision about any number of things, from, vehicle needs to staffing needs. So I don't think it needs to go and be above and beyond what other departments are providing. Just a way of analyzing the activity of the department on not a micro level, from a, still with a pretty zoomed out perspective.
Well, I think feeding on that, and then we can hear from Sheriff, looking at trends is really helpful, because I think you and your team have an eye on kind of what you're seeing year over year, how things are changing. And so what I'd love to see after all this is to have a discussion, maybe it's you and Gloria and Willie, and talk about, what kind of information is helpful for the county commissioners and the Board of Trustees year to year for the health, safety, and well-being of the community, right? Like what you guys see and what would be helpful to know, so that you can kind of raise that flag when you're seeing things like, hey, maybe there's a policy need here, or I just think seeing some trends consistently and knowing what that information might be could be helpful, because I think it could help us serve your department better and help the department highlight needs over time.
Yeah, and not information special for us, like information that's recycled and used at the county level as well. And with the community. Like, I don't think it needs to be something that only comes before us. Like, I think once it's created, it's reused for all of these stakeholders.
And having, to me, it's kind of like a good partnership for public safety, partnership between town, county, sheriff's office. You know, obviously our other first responders, fire department and our ambulance, we talked about that at the last meeting. Just, I think these are super important service providers that see things that we sometimes as individual residents don't see. And so having a regular yearly update from them, I think gives us insight as town leaders on how to better support the health, safety, and well-being of the community. So I think it's just a way to be good partners. So however that looks, or whatever information form that takes, but that's what I'd really like to see.
Well, thank you for being even more patient. We discussed all this. If you can stay seated there, you can come sit here, you can stand at the podium, whatever makes you cool.
I hope I kept up with my notes well enough to catch up to all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
All your questions.
it's totally up to you if you'd like to just respond to us for a while, or if you want to be in discussion mode, but
Yeah,
so do you.
I'm perfectly happy with how casual it seems. I appreciate that leeway. First of all, I always feel the need to thank you guys for what you do. Sitting here for the last hour and just watching all the bells and whistles and whatnot go off and the things you have to deal with, you should be paid an awful lot more. And I really like to thank Trustee Cranker for taking the time to give me a phone call and make an appointment. And we sat down and had a really great conversation. And I think better understood where I'm coming from and what's needed here. So I think that there is kind of a disconnect. And first of all, you keep using the word micromanaging. I know I started out bringing that word to the table, and I think I don't want to give the wrong impression of why I was feeling micromanaged. It's not about providing data. I've come to these meetings for years and years in a row now. I've always brought that data with me. This year, I'm sorry I didn't. I had a rather difficult fall, and I came and verbalized to you. I feel like we're still in the same kind of 75%, which makes your 60-40 split a pretty good deal. So I didn't bring those numbers with me in hard backed up facts. If you'd said we need those numbers, I'd have gotten to you in the next week, because it takes about that to put them together. I did get those numbers together for you, but again, it's not really about that. It's about, again, I felt frustrated because I tried to prepare this board, previous boards for the previous years that this increase was coming and was going to be necessary. And then we had this meeting and it felt like it was kind of rubber stamped in that meeting. I felt like everybody, yeah, I see what you're talking about and I get it. And then I go away and then all I hear from Gloria is the board has decided to not approve your additional position. That's where I felt micromanaged. It's not really to you guys to approve a position or not on the sheriff's office. And this comes from, I go to these meetings with 64 other sheriffs, and a lot of them are trapped in this position with the municipalities that they serve, and they're in really troublesome catch-22s with getting, every single detail managed by their board. And I don't want to set our office up for that in the future sheriffs up for that, or myself up for that. So that's where that micromanage word came in. And I feel like we're now tiptoeing around that, feeling like we can't ask me for numbers. That's not at all the case. I'm always willing to provide whatever information you guys would like to have. In the contract, it mentioned quarterly, which I did feel was rather impractical, strenuous. As we said in the first meeting, let's not set ourselves up for failure. That doesn't make any sense. I think biannual is really appropriate. One budgetary in the fall and one kind of in the spring to check in and see what's going on, what our goals are. I think biannual makes good sense. I think quarterly is not practical and not sensible. Annual is fine with me as well. So again, trying to keep up with all these notes here. The type of reporting that you guys want, having some consistency there, I think would make a lot of sense. And that's a lot of what Dan and I spoke about on a sidebar is having exactly what your expectations are. And it's that way I know what I need to meet every year. I think that's going to alleviate some of the issues between us, and I have no problem with that. I mean, there's things in one of the letters asking about training hours and things like that. Our training is mandated by the state. We have to meet certain training hours. We're not post-certified if we don't meet our training hours. It's a huge deal. I mean, I can send you what I send to the state. It's not going to make any sense to you, but that's just, that's something that in a good conversation we could have had and figured out. But again, these letters back and forth are kind of, as Shane said, getting in our way. I apologize for that. So I think that the thing that really is getting missed here, though, is that it's not really about the data. It's not about, Mary mentioned the need for increased capacity. It's not that we have a need to catch up with an increased, we don't need more staffing to catch up with an oncoming onslaught of more business coming our way. It's that we've been understaffed for years and years. And it's really, really hard to keep up with. And again, I'm not going to be here for much longer. John's not going to be here for much longer. I need to replace myself and replace a part-time officer as well. Also, one of the key ingredients to being comfortably well-staffed is getting to trainings, which is a very key, and it comes down to an officer safety issue for me. As I said, we meet our training hours right now, but a lot of it is kind of half-assed in that we're doing it through computer programs. We're doing it, online, spend 4 hours a night, sometimes at home, getting a 2-hour certification and having to add those hours up to meet our requirements at the end of the year. Those are trainings that we should be going to other communities to and having a more legitimate, hands-on, better training system. And we just haven't been able to do that for years. And I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't feel it's safe for our officers, for our community. We need better training. And part of being fully staffed is having the ability for people to go to trainings in a more appropriate way. So you mentioned about year-round inconsistencies, and I think it ties in too about need for staffing. It'd be great if I could hire a part-time post-certified officer that only worked in the meat of the summer. It's hard enough to hire an officer in general, let alone, we're really lucky to have John doing the part-time hours that he does. But I would love for that to be a potential, but it's not really even in the realm of possible. So having full-time officers, like I said in the last meeting, right now, our officers are pretty bored at night, especially at nighttime when our officer, we're burning gas and trying to work on other things and work on long-term projects. And that's the nature of the beast. We've got to cover the schedule 365 days a year. And sometimes we need 3 officers on at a time. We're calling people who are off duty to come and assist with stuff. Other times we're driving around listening to a book on tape. That's just the nature of the beast. So I wish I could somehow make that more consistent, but I don't have a magic pill for that. So talked about if we had more staffing on, would there be an increase in the number of town responses? I would say yes, not in a major way, but part of the goal all along has been to have 2 officers on during the meat of the day, especially in the summer, where we have an officer that's very town centric, because that's where most everything's happening. But most of that time we'll have 2 officers downtown because not a lot's happening out in the county. But when an officer gets called out to the county for an accident, winds up being on it for 4 hours, and everything that was happening in town when we only had 1 officer was unseen, undealt with. So I would see an increase in town stuff, but I wouldn't say in a tremendous way. I would expect that the percentage between town and county is going to stay somewhat similar in my mind. Parking going up and down, that's something that it's hard to put my finger on. It does flux a lot. I write more parking tickets than any other officer on our team. That changes in the winter when we have snow route parking. We have a nighttime officer that gets a pretty good number of parking tickets just because of snow route, as much as we try and educate and prevent people from getting those, because we don't like giving them, trust me. But parking is kind of a weird thing, and it relates back to the signage issue that I've been harping on for years and years with this board and different boards as well. We wouldn't have as much, the goal is not to have so much income from parking citations. The goal is to have people parking appropriately around town, and a big part of this is the signage that we're lacking. Our signage in town is absolutely ridiculous. There's so many signs that need to come down that are useless, that are wrong, and a lot of signs that need to go up that aren't there. It's something I'd love to see the town spend money on. John and I have had conversations about it. This board and I have had conversations about it, and we're still in a really crappy signage situation. So we'd write a lot of tickets we probably wouldn't need to had we better signs. There are other tickets that we would write that we'd feel more comfortable writing if there was appropriate signage there for them, but it's kind of questionable. So I don't know if I'd see the variances in the number of parking tickets changing in coming years. But I would expect there would be more offhand if we're gonna have an officer downtown more often. Contract stuff, there's a couple of really minor things in there, that need to be taken out. One is just, these are so minor, I'm not sure if we should talk about them here, but one is kind of a big deal. It talks about us having, facilities, and this would be in 3G. It talks about us having facilities for, keeping impounded animals. We haven't had that for long before I've been in law enforcement, and I don't foresee us having any kind of facility. It became unfeasible with the requirements you had to have a facility to keep a dog. We used to have a garage on the side of the town barn where dogs were inappropriately shoved in until we found their owner, and that's not going to fly. So when we have dogs, we keep them in our car. I've taken dogs home. I've had to spend 2-3 nights with dogs before we got them back to their owners in other towns. So we do what we do in that, but I don't want to have the contract reflect that we have a facility for that when we don't. And what's that? Oh, I'm not sure which of you were talking about kind of the difference between whether there's a really busy 4th of July or things are rowdy in town or not. It just made me think that, I'm pretty proud in the change of demeanor this town has seen over the course of my being involved with the sheriff's office. When I came here 30 years ago and was tending bar here, and there was a fight every damn night. And you don't see that much anymore. And I think that's in big part due to the fact that people in town know if you punch someone in the face, you're gonna have consequences. And so I just felt like the need to bring that up because I think I'm pretty proud of what our team does in this town, and the demeanor change has been for the good. And we have a lot more people coming into town these days than we used to, but it's maintained to a really nice, peaceful place you want to be. And I'm proud of that. I wanted to pass that along as well. The micromanage thing, I just had it asterisk there because I don't want that to be any kind of a misconception, but. So I don't know if I answered all your questions, or if you have any questions, and especially with that data, I know there's kind of 3 different sets of data there that can be confusing, and be happy to further explain that if you have any questions about it as well.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So the community, I'd like to have a packaged response to the community member that looks at the information we have and sees a 53% decrease in cases from 2021 to 2022, or compare, like 2021 is the peak year of the data we have, 278. So if we do 2021 to 2023, it's still a 37% decrease. Over those times, we saw budget increases of 18% from 2021 to 2023, or a 21% increase from 2021 to 2024. And so what's the thing that we tell the community member that says, if case numbers are down, why is budget going up?
Well, if the Harley shop saw a 23% decrease in their t-shirt sales, they'd still have to have someone behind the register.
Sure.
You have to know how to run the register. You have to be there consistently. You have to afford to be able to live in town. We have to cover the schedule.
Okay, so the percentage, so it's like the cost of running the department is the cost of running the department, whether the department's at capacity in terms of being, getting calls, or just driving around. You have to staff as you have to staff, so the cost is the cost.
For the most part, I think that's very true. The one big variable that we have no control over is the jail budget. Now, some years we spend $7,000 on jail. One year we spent $45,000 on jail. We can't control who needs to go to jail. That's not something we can foresee. So that number is always a kind of guesstimate, and hopefully we have a lot of money left at the end of the year. But some years we've been in the hole in that fund. But I'd say as a whole, yeah, that's very valid.
Because I think for me, that was the biggest hurdle I was having, is that I was connecting budget to demand as opposed to just the cost to staff 24/7, 365. And so, yeah, I mean, cost of living's increased, I'm sure hiring people, base salaries, expectations are increasing. So that helps answer, I think, my biggest disconnect of seeing call volume go down, but budget go up. And I think being able to talk to the community about that is also super helpful.
I think the other thing I would say to the community is to compare what you're getting for what you're spending. I mean, the numbers I presented to you to some of our neighbors are not unusual for other agencies around the state. I've talked to a few other people. I haven't got their hard numbers in the mail, but I could if necessary. But we do an awful lot for an awful little. And I think that is something that I'm proud of and that our community should be happy with as well.
Yeah, I think that was really helpful, Sheriff, in the kind of disconnect again to what Shane is saying, because I think we were saying, well, show us the justification, show us in the numbers that like, hey, it's like when I hear at the chamber meetings, oh, visitors are up 20%, right? Then that obviously has impacts to what's happening in town. And so I think the board or some of us on the board were saying, well, show us in the call volume, in the demand, in the like increase in public safety issues that help us say to the community, hey, this is what we need to spend our money on. And this is why. And I think what I hear you saying, what was really helpful and insightful tonight as well in our conversation was like, staffing has been too low for a while for you to have the sheriff's department that you think is sufficient for this town and to cover like just the operational budget of what it costs to staff, like we said, 365 days a year. And so it doesn't really matter what the call volume is doing because I still need those bodies, those deputies to be able to serve the town and serve the county. And so I think that was helpful because even if you went back with historic data, you still have to have people covering the shifts.
But I think the other thing that was helpful too is the recognition that there's going to be a transition. And you need to be ready for that with your part-time officer and you hoping to no longer be in this position. Like this is also preparing the department for the future and that makes it an investment. Even if it is a budget increase, now it's to prepare for these changes that are coming. That was really helpful.
Do you see a world in which maybe this is micromanaging, so tell me if you see a world in which like you're trying to staff up in the event that your part-time officer retires and then you kind of replace that part-time position with a full-time position? Or do you still see kind of that need?
That would be the ideal. When John moves on, it'd be great to have someone that was a full-time officer that replaced that. We wouldn't need the part-time position.
Yeah.
We wouldn't need 5.5, 5 would be great.
Yeah. At the end of a shift, I buy my eggs from him. I don't know who I'm going to get eggs from if John ever retires, but we'll figure it out.
Bring them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the real difficult things, and this is coming from experience in my position at my job, is trying to explain to people that just because we've been able to make it work on a certain budget for 3, 4, 5 years doesn't mean it was the right way to do it. And especially for those of us that do have to staff 24/7, 365, when people say, well, you've been doing it for 5 years, why do you need more money? It does become untenable. And I'm surprised that you've been able to do it for as long as you have. So after looking back and seeing the previous requests, we just seeing the numbers to make it fit the contract and make sure that, the reporting was done. I appreciate what you've been doing and thank you.
Right. If the ask is like to continue overworking yourself, obviously that's untenable and not a solution for the department. So thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming again and clarifying and providing the written information. I think that's helpful for us to go off of. And I hope in the future we can just, have a clear conversation with our variety of public partners on, okay, what's good for the community to hear every year and make it consistent. So we don't have these like convoluted conversations of he said, she said, this letter, that letter, who said what.
Come is really important.
Yeah. It's great to see you.
It's really good to have you.
think having you here is, it's important.
Thank you. Happy to show up. Don't need to be absent in any way.
Thanks for coming.
Great. Shall I leave you all now? You don't have to.
No, we've still got.
You really need more money. Do we want to give direction to Gloria on this topic?
Yes.
So is the proposal to give direction to Gloria to accept the funding as presented in the sheriff's letter?
That's what I'm. Or the original that we had set aside as a circle back to.
I like the funding solution that the sheriff has presented to us, and then I just wonder if there's anything else in the contract that would just be sheriff and Gloria working out, like, for example, that's minor edit. Like, do we need to give direction on that piece as far as the contract goes?
Yes, I can present you all with a new draft on the 22nd.
Or any other thoughts?
Or you can give me the ability to negotiate the contract with the sheriff as well.
I think that sounds very sensible. Those edits are, I think, straightforward.
I'm seeing thumbs up and nods. So the direction that I'm hearing is to have Gloria and Clayton work with Bruce to revise the contract, remove any of these impossible, minor conflicts, and do we have to do a fully amended budget to provide the 50% of this role's cost as an increase?
We can do it two ways. We can either do an amended 2024 budget since it's before the 31st of this month, or we can do a supplemental budget at the end of the year.
What's the least amount of work for you?
A supplemental budget at the end of the year.
Does that have any substantive impact whatsoever?
The only thing I'm going to have to double check is with the auditor because we go off of the numbers in the budget for the contracted services. But I think since we held this meeting and with that letter, we might be able to justify it.
So I guess the direction is to revise the contract with Bruce and Clayton. And I guess if anything rises to a substantive level to bring it back to us, but if you feel comfortable with all of that it's being made, you have our direction to proceed and then to also pursue whichever budget revision is the least amount of work for you to approve Bruce's request and his memo submitted in this meeting packet. Does that sound good, everybody?
Great.
Does that sound good to you, Bruce?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is continued business 9B, which is the wind phone at the cemetery. And I realized I had asked I made a statement at the last meeting about this topic. And I asked that this be an agenda item so that we could bring some finality to the community since there's people who have expressed strong opinions about this. And so I think to tee off the discussion, it would be a question to the board of, how do we want to respond to the community about the wind phone and also to staff with respect to the cemetery committee and our understanding that it's kind of like an 8 or so month process to properly establish a new committee. and how we'd like to prioritize that request. And I'll reiterate that I'm in support of keeping the wind phone. Once I understood the reasons behind it and the intent behind it, it's a very meaningful addition to the community, and we've received a lot of public comment. Well, we've received a lot of public input in the form of emails, and as well as some public comment at meetings. I have seen almost entirely supportive public comment over the last couple of weeks. So it seems like those that have chosen to weigh in are also in support.
Well, and from the first time this topic came up, I think it's on recording me saying that we really need to consider the context around this. And I know the Historical Society has expressed upset, but I think there's a strong reason to keep the wind phone as it is with no alterations.
I think, beyond my personal opinion with the wind phone, which I fully support, it's clear to me that Nancy Brockman followed all the rules that were in place with the town. I think on top of that, from our previous meeting, it seemed very reasonable for the town to have guidelines for the cemetery. That doesn't seem out of line. That seems not onerous. I think Nancy went out of her way to ask if there were and try to follow the appropriate process. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to have guidelines, and I'm really agreeable to the Board of Trustees being the de facto regulator until our staff and board has the capacity to set up a committee. I do think that it's important to mention a couple of things. I really want to acknowledge and affirm the significant and unparalleled impact that the Historical Society has had on the preservation and maintenance of the cemetery. I think that's not in question. I think that should just totally be affirmed and recognized. I also think it's important to acknowledge for the public, and it's in the staff memo, that this board did attempt to reactivate the cemetery committee in some form. And we went to the Historical Society to try to pursue that route and didn't really get anywhere when it came to kind of creating some capital improvements plans or providing some direction on how capital improvements money should be spent at the cemetery. So I just think it's important to acknowledge that there was an attempt of this board to reform, reinvigorate, reevaluate the cemetery committee in partnership with our Historical Society partners. And it wasn't super clear on how they wanted to engage. So just wanted to put that out there for the public. And I think thus far we've been operating within the current guidelines and operational policies that we have. And so I think, again, it's something that we can put on the list for staff, but in the meantime, the Board of Trustees is kind of the de facto guideline arbiter for the future. But yeah, I would, as Liv said in our previous meeting, encourage us all to be kind and generous as we talk about these kinds of scenarios.
Does anyone have anything else to add so far?
No, I went back and I've read all the public comment, and I read Nancy Brockman's letter to the paper. Yeah, she did everything that she needed to do to put the wind phone in, and it seems like there's huge public support for it, and it also is just, the sentiment is really heartfelt and honest, and I'm in total support of it.
I think that's well said, Tyler, and
Everyone, Dana and Liv and
Shane. I think that the wind phone is
actually one of the most commented on issues that we've addressed recently. And I mean, it's helpful to receive comment, I think, when you're in this situation, because it's not necessarily something that is always intuitive. So the wind phone has significant meaning, And Melanie mentioned earlier, it's an emotional, people have emotional connections in many directions, and to be an arbiter of something like that in this position is always, it's always really challenging, I think, and it's, in the case of the wind phone, regardless of this, the significance of it and, you know, the specialness that it has, which we've heard from a lot of people. I think to what Dana said, like, there was no, Nancy followed the rules, and that's what we're here to really evaluate. And I think it needs to stay where it is, not only because it's really special, but also because I think it would be wildly unfair and irresponsible for the board to act in a way that's contrary to what we're here to do. And then beyond that, you know, we've had to sit at this table and really listen to very emotional issues over, you know, the past few years for me personally. And I think as we do that and we talk to each other, to speak to what Dana said, but really, like, it's such a lived experience for me, is the way that we talk to each other and interpret behaviors and decisions in this tiny little town of ours is so significant to how we relate to each other year after year after year. And so I haven't really been a part of any verbal conversation. I've only read the public comment on this, but for people in our community who are at odds with each other and maybe are really feeling passionate and emotional on this issue, I just hope that there's a way to find some repair and some healing around it, because I think what I see as we wade our way through these really passionate and emotional issues is that I think people have the best of intent when they head into them. And the intent of the cemetery committee is really pure. And, you know, the cemetery committee and the Historic Society, they want the cemetery to be a beautiful and sacred space. And the people who are, you know, buried there and their families and, you know, the people who are interacting with that space just as community members also have really positive intent around it. And so as we, like, bring some closure to this issue, I hope that no one takes it so far that a relationship can't be repaired from the harm, because I think it takes a lot of work to maintain our relationships. And this is a small town. And at the end of the day, hopefully we get to wake up the next day and see each other and say hi, and it can be friendly, and at least we care about each other in the end. And that's just like too much probably for this little agenda item, but I've just thought so much about it as our terms kind of come to a close. And I think this is just clearly a really passionate issue for people. So there are always passionate issues. We just have to
keep talking to each other,
maintain our relationships. Yep. That's what I have to say. And I do support the wind phone personally, but.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing in terms of overall board direction is that we would like to maintain the wind phone as it is where it is. The other staff direction that we were looking at is whether or not, so with the board as kind of arbiter until the time that a cemetery committee is reformed, although the wind phone is a positive addition in our view, it is possible without some type of additional rules in place that perhaps something in the future could be put in the cemetery that isn't viewed as a positive addition by the board. And we would like the ability to decide on that. So staff is curious if we'd like to recommend a rule that we will, as a board, review a sketch or picture or description of a headstone before placed and approved. And that seems that seems like a reasonable thing for us to do, and I don't think we'll be overwhelmed from a time perspective in terms of how many headstones are being placed annually. Does that sound like?
Marina, do you have, like, what is it annually? Just curious.
I mean, plot purchases in general, there are a handful, probably 6 or 7
Which doesn't necessarily mean a plot purchase doesn't mean a headstone.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
majority of plots being purchased are being purchased well in advance.
Right.
I think maybe there was one other headstone placed this year other than the wind phone.
Okay. Reasonable.
And so that I figure will come in the consent agenda when it does arise.
So any objection to the board reviewing some type of sketch or picture description of headstones before they're allowed to be placed? Okay, so direction to do that. The other direction, I'm going to take a different opinion than what's in the memo. So there was a suggestion that we also not allow headstones to be placed until death certificates are received. And I actually think that might be too specific. That if we're going to review headstones before they're placed at that time, that board can decide if it's appropriate to place the headstone whenever the person who's requesting it wants to place it, as opposed to making it a blanket rule. Because in this instance, for example, we would have had to say no to the wind phone. And this is a perfect example of us needing to then break a rule that we do now.
I think the death certificate is an unnecessary requirement.
And it wasn't a requirement.
It was,
For as far as I know. I think that there are a handful that are probably placed beforehand, but the majority of headstones are going to be placed post-mortem anyway.
Yeah.
And then I'm actually going to recommend that we table the reinstating of a cemetery committee unless more complicated issues come up, because if the primary reason for reinstating the committee is to review the 1 to 5 headstone requests per year, that doesn't seem terribly taxing on the board relative to like a 5+ month process of properly creating the committee. But if other cemetery issues continue to arise, then I would change that kind of view.
I think that there are probably a few things that could be addressed, and maybe we can wait until spring. So to revisit it.
Well, and maybe with a new board and thinking about committees, like this used to be connected to Facilities Parks and Rec Committee, like, so just revisiting it in the future, but not giving staff direction to pursue establishing a cemetery committee, pursue the process to establish the cemetery committee at this moment.
And like we did kind of reinstate a committee once during our tenure that didn't pan out, and I'd hate to create a committee for the sole purpose of a single issue.
I will say though, in the time that we've been doing this, there are a handful of
The defense.
I think cleanup, just generally
ongoing
repairs, maintenance. I mean, I don't think it's a complete.
Well,
I don't think it's a good idea to spend our time over the next several months creating a committee for the sole single issue. And when it's time and when there's some capacity for it, I think there will be things for the committee to do.
I mean, that also, the Facilities Parks and Rec Committee currently has responsibility for reviewing issues and recommending them to the board. So there's some, but it's not a citizen committee. But perhaps that's something where when cemetery issues come up,
there's
maybe we can have community members that participate in those Parks and Rec meetings.
Right.
Any clarification on our direction? You did. Cool. Any other comments from Jim, Tyler, Jordan? Okay. Well, thank you all for a good discussion on this. The next item on our agenda is continued business 9C, Resolution 2023-19, a resolution appropriating all lodging and camping fees collected in accordance with Chapter 4, Section 7, subsection 60 of the Town of Silverton Code to specific expenses in the 2024 budget related to municipal services and infrastructure.
And I'm happy to introduce this one. This was requested at the December meeting when presented with the last resolution that had been kind of recycled year over year. And then Trustee Harper suggested that we increase those to offset some of the upcoming burden on our water and sewer infrastructure.
Thank you very much.
Did town hear any feedback at town hall since we've had this discussion?
I have not heard any feedback. I know we are prepping a letter. I don't know if the letter went out or not yet, Melina. Yeah,
It did.
okay.
Yes, it did.
To the businesses explaining. Go ahead, Melina.
Yeah, we sent a letter just reminding everybody that they needed to renew their business license and vacation rentals, and in that we put that the fees were going to be going up. I think that today we had one commenter that was worried that the extra $10 for a week was going to deter people from staying at their place.
Okay.
But that was the only negative comment that we've had so far. Everybody else does not seem to mind.
Thanks.
And it's not an exact doubling of each one, but I guess the assumption is that we'll see something in the ballpark of $70,000 of additional revenue from this distributed to the water and sewer funds, which is where we're going to see the biggest citizen impact for cost.
Right. Yep.
So this is pretty helpful.
Right. And just for folks that may not have listened to the original discussion of this, again, the intention really is to, I think, as Jim proposed, to decrease the burden on our year-round residents for some of these new infrastructure costs that we're going to be facing, and to find a way to generate revenue from some of our visitors and in other areas to reduce the burden on our locals.
Great. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2023-19, resolution appropriating all lodging and camping fees collected in accordance with chapter 4, section 7, subpart 60 of the town of Silverton code to specific expenses in the 2024 budget related to municipal services and infrastructure?
So moved.
Thank you, Tyler. Do we have a second?
Second.
Sally, roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Cranker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Birma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. Thank you very much. All right, moving to continued business 9D. This is a public hearing. It's the second reading of ordinance 2023-11, an ordinance amending chapter 16, article 2, division 4 of the municipal code of the town of Silverton, Colorado, by amending the historic review committee ordinance.
This is the second reading of ordinance 2023-11, which is to allow alternate members to serve on the historic review committee when regular members are absent. I wanted to note here that at the last meeting, I made a recommendation that the board could later select their alternate member. However, I was misinformed at that meeting, and there is an alternate member, and it's Jim Harper. And I didn't realize at the time, so I just wanted to announce that. And then if passed, this will be enforceable in 30 days. And that correction on that date and the memo, it's actually going to be February 7th. So the regular February meeting is the first time that an alternate would be able to vote if a regular member is absent.
Awesome, thank you. And as a public hearing, we will now open public comment. We do not have anyone in person. If you're on Zoom and would like to make a public comment on this public hearing topic, please click the raise hand button. We will promote you to panelist. And then following public comment, we'll have trustee discussion and then consideration of the decision. I do see someone who appears to be raising their hand.
And again, it's on this particular topic. If you have general public comment
That'll be in a moment.
in a minute.
Yeah. I mean, are we seeing that like not promoting on Zoom, or is that person just kind of disappearing?
It's Christina.
It's Christina. I think maybe she put her hand back.
Oh, got it. Okay, so seeing no public comment for this public hearing topic, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to trustee discussion. Any new thoughts? Are we still in support of this?
We're still in support. Roll.
Great. Would someone like to make a motion? Would someone like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 2020-11 to allow alternate members to serve on the Historic Review Committee when its regular members are absent?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Kränker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Bierma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you very much. So we are now at our public comment at the close of the meeting. So please click the raise hand button if you would like to make a public comment on any topic. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Thank you all for a productive meeting.
Do have that. No.
Did it pop back up?
Again, I don't know.
Yeah, there was a hand. I saw it too, but
Didn't see it.
There is no hand currently. I'm closing public comment. I apologize if you're having technical issues on Zoom. Thank you all very much. The time's 9:53 p.m. I adjourn this meeting. Have a wonderful night. Happy New Year.
okay.